All right, today we're going to dig into something really powerful for anyone in software, a documentation framework called Diátaxis. Now I know, documentation doesn't always sound exciting, but stick with me. This is a system that's designed to solve some of the deepest, most frustrating problems in development, the kind of stuff that slows down teams, creates total chaos, and makes scaling feel pretty much impossible. This is all about replacing that chaos with clarity. So, let's see how it works.
And this quote from Elon Musk just hits the nail on the head. In the rush to build and automate everything, we so often forget the most important first step, to just stop and question our processes. We spend so much time and energy optimizing things that, if we just had a little more clarity, we'd realize shouldn't even exist. It's a huge reminder to get clear on what you're doing before you obsess over doing it faster. So, first things first, let's really define the problem we're trying to solve. Every single engineering team feels this constant drag on productivity, right? But the costs are often invisible. They just silently pile up until one day, everything grinds to a halt. And we need to be clear about two different kinds of debt here. Over on the left, you've got technical debt. This lives right inside your code base. It's what happens when you take shortcuts and you end up with messy, hard-to-maintain code. But then on the right, you've got process debt. Now, this isn't about the code itself, but all the clunky, inefficient workflows around the code. You know, the manual routines and outdated habits that just slow everyone down.
And the cost, look at this number. It's absolutely staggering. Industry estimates say that accumulated technical debt costs the U.S. economy over $1.5 trillion every year. This isn't just some small annoyance. It's a massive, massive drain on innovation that hits almost every company out there.
So what does this debt actually look like in your day-to-day? Well, it's that terrible documentation that only lives in one person's head. It's that feeling of fear when you have to do a deployment because the tests are flaky or the whole process is manual. And of course, it's that infamous spaghetti code that everyone is terrified to touch. These are the symptoms that tell you you're paying a really high interest rate on old decisions.
Okay, so it sounds pretty bad, right? But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Once we really get a handle on the problem, we can actually start to introduce a solution. So let's jump into a framework that brings structure and clarity right where we need it the most, in our documentation. And this is the Diátaxis framework. The core idea is actually really simple, but it's kind of revolutionary. Stop trying to write one giant confusing manual that does everything for everyone. Instead, you recognize that your users have 4 very different needs, and you create 4 different types of documentation to serve them. It's all about precision and purpose. And here it is, the heart of the framework, all laid out in this simple grid. It forces us to ask 2 key questions. Is the user trying to learn something new, or are they trying to get a specific task done? And do they need practical steps, or do they need a conceptual understanding? Each box you see here answers a different combination of those questions, which means every single piece of documentation has one single clear purpose. First up, tutorials. You can think of this like your very first driving lesson. It's a guided, hands-on experience that's all about taking a total beginner and helping them build a core skill. The goal here isn't to make them an expert, it's just to give them some confidence. Next, we've got how-to guides. So if a tutorial is that first driving lesson, a how-to guide is like your GPS giving you directions to a specific place. The user already knows how to drive, they just need the exact steps to accomplish one single goal, like, say, deploying a specific service. Then we have reference material. This is basically the dictionary or the encyclopedia for your system. It's not something you sit down and read like a book. It's where you go to look up a specific fact, like an API endpoint or a config setting. It's got to be precise, accurate, and straight to the point. And finally, we have explanation. This is the documentation that answers the big question, why? It gives you the bigger picture, the architectural decisions, the trade-offs that were made, all the context. This is the stuff that helps a developer go from just using your system to truly understanding it. Okay, so we have this really smart framework, but how in the world do you actually use it in a fast-paced development team? Well, the answer is to start treating your documentation exactly like you treat your code.
This whole thing is called the Docs as Code workflow. It's all about pulling documentation right into the developer's world. You write it in simple formats like Markdown that they already use. You store it in Git right there next to the source code. And here's the crucial part. Doc updates become part of the pull request review process. And finally, you just automate publishing it through your existing CI/CD pipeline.
And the payoff here? Well, it solves the single biggest, most infuriating problem with documentation, drift. You know what I'm talking about? That maddening gap where the docs say one thing, but the code actually does something totally different.
By tying them together in the same workflow, you build a system where they literally can't fall out of sync. Now, once your documentation is clear, it's structured, and most importantly, it's reliable, you unlock the next level of efficiency. You can start turning those trusted documents into actual automation. Remember those how-to guides we talked about in the Diátaxis framework? Because they are so clear, so goal-oriented, and version-controlled, they become the perfect blueprint for creating reliable standard operating procedures, or SOPs. And those SOPs, they are the foundation for automation.
And this is where it gets really powerful. Instead of relying on manual checklists and audits that happen after a problem occurs, you can turn your SOPs into policy as code. This completely shifts verification from a slow, manual process to an automated check that runs before anything ever gets deployed. Your process isn't just ambiguous words in a doc anymore. It's actual executable code. And the feedback for the developer is immediate. Which brings us right back to where we started. This quote is such a powerful warning. If you jump straight to automation without first getting that clarity from a framework like Diátaxis, you're not actually solving problems. You're just automating your own confusion, and you're making bad things happen way, way faster. Okay, so let's recap. We've established clarity with Diátaxis, we've built consistency with Docs as code, and we've started automating with policy as code. So what's the end game here? What's the ultimate payoff for all this work? It's the ability to scale your team without everything collapsing into chaos.
I mean, just look at this comparison. On the left, you have everything that works okay for a tiny team, but just breaks spectacularly when you try to grow, relying on a few heroes, tribal knowledge trapped in people's heads, and doing everything manually. But on the right, you have what actually scales. Real systems, great documentation, automation, and clear ownership. It's the boring stuff that ends up saving your weekends.
So when you put it all together, what does this foundation for scaling really look like? It's kind of like a pyramid built on 3 simple layers. At the bottom, you have clarity, which comes from the Diátaxis framework. That gives everything a clear purpose. Then you have consistency from Docs as code, which keeps all that information reliable. And at the top, you have confidence, which comes from policy as code, giving you automated guardrails so your teams can move fast without breaking things. And that brings me to the last thing I want to leave you with. Whether you realize it or not, your team's habits and workflows, they're becoming permanent. They're becoming automated systems one way or another. So the real question is, are you intentionally designing those systems for clarity and for scale? Or are you just letting chaotic processes design your team's future for you?